Brakati Yahweh, Brakati Yahushai, Brakati Yahweh, Brakati Yahushai, Brakati Yahweh, Brakati Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rachak Kudash. The belongs to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. True well, salutation to the hopeful elect out there, you Akim to Zadakim that do this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity. On the pre-Shaman, this week's topic, we're going to be going into dealing with hostile situations. What inspired me to do this lesson was a video was shared with me of well, now I know the guy was a former member of Great Millstone in Canada, I believe, Ontario, right? And he was going back and forth with an individual, and I guess the other guy pulled out a gun. He then began to wrestle with him, beat the shit out of him, take the gun, I think give him back the gun. That was a hostile situation. Now, the video was being narrated, or there was another guy speaking over the video, kind of cheering him on and shit. Go on, Cole! Look, you know, I get that looks great on camera, but that's really not how the scriptures tell us to go about doing things, you know. And I'm gonna say with all respects, it's much easier to say, you know, what you could have done, what you should have did, you know, when you're looking at it on the video. In the heat of the moment, emotions are flared, you want to fly, people could react far more differently. So I'm not just gonna be getting on the brother, right? He was delivered, the Most High did deliver him, you know, and maybe that's for him to look back and say, hey, I could have did this differently, that differently. But, you know, all praises to Most High Yahweh Bashim Yahushai for delivering that brother. But in terms of dealing with hostile situations, the course of action should always be to de-escalate, you know. Like when I was watching the video, you know, once the gun is drawn, that's when you just, all right, you're right. You're right, you're right. You're right, yep. You got it, you got it. Once that person leaves, then you leave, and that's it. But the gun was drawn, and the brother was still trying to prove a point. I'm just like, you know, at that point, it's just, I don't know what you're trying to do. You know, what are you trying to prove, brother? I mean, the guy's not going to change. You know, is that because the camera is on? I don't know. But the moment things are, because remember, the scriptures tell us, you know, the weapons of warfare are not carnal. You know, once somebody's taken it to that carnal level, they're not trying to be spiritual no more. They're looking for any reasons to get carnal. And I think like the worst, you know, like I think like, you know, you wrestling the guy on the floor, there's a gun there, you don't know, a cop could see it, you don't know what they're gonna think, a bystander could see it, they could not know what's going on. A lot could have happened, you know. The guy cheering him on in the video, go walk, yeah, knock him out. What if you hear pop? His brains on the floor and shit. Like I said, it could have gone a lot worse, and I say that from seeing it gone not how in his favor. Years ago, we had a guy in the camp, something similar happened where he was like wrestling with a guy with a gun and shit in his building. Gun went off. He was in jail. He actually got disgruntled that he said brothers doesn't visit him or whatever. He fell out, shit like that. But it doesn't always turn out that way. So the best thing to do in any situation, whether it's gun, knives, whatever, hell, I remember a while back in Texas, Elder Yashawamba, he shut the camp down because I guess some provocateurs threw water at them and shit. Just said, shut the camp down, we out. Anytime you see shit is about to escalate beyond spiritual, de-escalate and get the fuck out of there, you know what I'm saying? This is the book of Ecclesiasticus. What? Okay, Ecclesiasticus chapter 28, verse 25. It says, and weigh thy words in a balance, and make a door and bar for thy mouth. Right, you gotta weigh your words in the balance. You know, at some point, there's a time to be, you know, I get it, bold, standing bold and firm for the scriptures, all right? But there's a time when you gotta agree with your adversary quickly. It's sort of like the same thing we say, like, you know, you watch these jakes, the cop is telling them to calm or down and shit, and they still kind of escalating the situation and shit, then they get blown away, and then they blame the cop. When you know, you like, look, you should have just agreed with the officer. You know, it's the same situation kind of, you know, when somebody is Scriptures speak about having the power to take your life. You got to be very mindful to control your spirit and control your words. So, you know, once weapons are drawn, it ain't no point in trying to prove this guy's an Edomite and shit like that, you know. Proverbs 5 and 20, I'm sorry, Matthew 5 and 25 says, agree with thine adversary quickly while thou art in the way with him. And I remember, y'all brothers, I don't know, y'all remember Ayasha Moth from North Carolina? And now in 2011, he was going back and forth with the cops and saying, yo, bring that precept out, while he was getting locked up and shit. Now after he got kicked out, or whatever, demons jumped on him. The apostles was like, at the time being called elders, they was like watching it like, I don't know where the fuck you learned that from. We never tell you to. Now on the camera it might look like some holy's heroic and shit, but look, man, we're not out there to be John Wick. We're not out there to be some Malcolm X type shit. That's not really our job. Our job is not to put on for people or nothing like that. Our job is simply to be prophets of the Heavenly Father and put on for Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, which is a spiritual warfare. That is it. A spiritual, keep it as spiritual as you can at all times. You see some of these camps fucking fighting over spots. We was here first, and it's getting a brawl and shit. Not being spiritual. We should keep it spiritual at all times. You know, I know like I'm making jokes in the midst of this thing, brothers, but I'm being dead serious. You know, our ultimate thing is to just follow what the scriptures said, man. That's Yahweh Shah itself telling us, agree with your adversary quickly while thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer. Now, thankfully, that situation was captured on camera, and what I'm also hearing is that was a BB gun or some shit like that. But again, if this is a real gun, shit get escalated to the court systems, fingerprints on the weapon. You're just giving yourself more drama and more headache than what's necessary. If you'd have just let the shit ride, you know what I'm saying? Instead of being confrontational, you know, you try to put, the best thing to do is try to put out the fire with water, not gasoline. You get what I mean? It says, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. So Yahweh Shah is breaking it. That's what he was. That's the advice he was given to. He's given us. 26. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. Right now you got to get out. You need the bond money and shit to get out. You're locked up. So all praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua for not making that shit turn to the worst scenario. But that scenario could be used as self-reflection to, you know, let's just stick to what the scriptures tell us how to do things, you know what I mean? Proverbs 15 and 1 says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. Right, a soft answer. You know? Before we master this, as Eldai Knott would always bring out in the movie Braveheart, we have to master this, right? Our wits. So, you know, we shouldn't be cheering no shit like that on. Yeah, I go knock them out. Y'all, nah, brother, the fuck is that's not what we're here for, man. All right, that's not what the scriptures is telling us to do. You know, the scriptures are really telling us to use our tongue wisely. You know, there's no need to escalate shit. Be confrontation with these people, go back and forth with these people. The moment you see shit like that, your job is to, how can I de-escalate this and get the fuck out of here as soon as possible, really. Proverbs 15 and 1 says, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger, right? So the guy is telling you, you're going back and forth with a guy, you know, about him being an Edomite and shit. He pulls out a gun and you still trying to prove he's an Edomite. You just stirring shit up. You know, which is not really a sound thing to do. You know. Proverbs 15:8, a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeases strife. Right. So you gotta really be slow to anger. And keep things scriptural. Keep things scriptural. Brothers that have in my camp that seeing how I interact with these people, you can see anytime I see anybody about to get shot at, hey, chill out. I try myself, chill out. Like, we're not trying to get there with these people, because first and foremost, we out there to teach and edify the elect, and we understand that these things are going to get hostile, but our job at all times is to not match that energy. Our job is to remain spiritual, you know what I'm saying? Calm demeanor. And that honestly becomes easier with repetition, with experience, if you will. Because after a while you realize very quickly that shouting match and all that shit really amounts to nothing. It's not gonna change anybody's opinion. It's not gonna, it's not gonna do anything. Who used to like shit like that? Those fly-by-nighters on 34th. They would love that shit when the apostles get into something when we used to get into shit with people on 30, because 34th were far more active. You have a lot more people passing by, tourists and shit like that, and it was seen for like entertainment, and that's sort of the vibe that I was getting when the guy was like cheering them on and shit. It seemed like some entertainment, like some, but again, it's not about that, right? It says, a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeases strife. Right? He that is slow to anger appeases strife. Yo, my grandfather, man, he's I think he's about to hit 90. Right? Yeah, definitely about to hit 90. And he knows he's an Israelite. He's a Bible studying guy from the islands. So he don't got the internet like that. Like, he has the internet, but he doesn't go on no videos or nothing like that. But he knew just from reading that we're the Israelites. He might not know the tribes breakdown, but he knows that these pagan holidays. He knows that so-called white man is Esau. He figured all that stuff out just from reading the scriptures in the Apocrypha for decades of his life. So anyways, one time he comes up, he's visiting my family up here in America, and he was just on the couch, and I don't know what caused him to say this, but he knows I'm into the scriptures. I could learn a lot from him, and I always go back and forth with him, not in a bad way, just like, he knows a lot. And he's sitting on the couch, and he goes like this. He puts up his hands. He looked at his hands, and he said, you see these two hands here? He said these two hands have never been in a fight. Now, depending on who you are, that you might take that a particular way. I took it as this, that throughout his years, he's always used wisdom and kind words to not have shit escalate to a fight. You know what I'm saying? Again, there's nothing wrong with doing your own training and boxing and shit, but even like these professional fighters, they always talk about how the best thing to do is to run and de-escalate and these sorts of things. You know what I'm saying? So I was just like, yeah, that's the entire life of you have used wisdom to where none of your adversaries has escalated shit to a physical point, or you never even brought people to be adversarial for you in that way, to get shit physical. So he's well respected in Jamaica too, where he lives at. Proverbs 21:23 says, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. And that links perfectly with the testimony I just gave about my grandfather. And that's how you want to be, man. You know what I'm saying? That's how you want to be. Mastery of words, mastery of your spirit, and controlling situations. Using wisdom as the scriptures tell us to do. Proverbs 8, and this is not me just getting on the Toronto brother that got in that shit. It's just It's just generally speaking, you know. And if everything I'm saying, I'm applying it to myself, you know. Hell, I did that show about the guy who put the fucking pork on the pizza, Hawaiian, which I accidentally ordered, and I went in there like, why the fuck you put? I had to check myself. I had to wait a minute. There's cameras. There's probably a logical reason as to why this happened. Turns out it was a mistake on my part. Calm the shit down. You know, you really at all times you kind of want to get back yourself to be calm and not, you know, escalate shit. Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Right. So pretty much you could live or die based on what you say. You know, I'm pretty sure, you know, it was great to see that brother get delivered, but most I forbid that shit would have went worse, and he would have, you know, could have lost his life or been shot and locked up. Worse could have happened. A lot of, you know, it would have been like, oh, he could have did this different, that different. But the fact that they didn't, the guy that was shit the video was just like egging him on, and yeah, not egging him on, but like, because I don't think it was live. He was just playing back what happened and shit. So other people might see that and be like, oh, that's how you should move. No, that's not how the scriptures tell us to move. You know, we gotta stick back to the scriptures, not how we feel and shit. You know, the scriptures tell us first and foremost we gotta be using this, and then using this lastly, self-defense lastly. Even like these, I got this store manager job. You got to go through particular training. They tell you how to deal with that shit. Like if somebody's getting hostile, somebody has a weapon, and physical is the last shit. They tell you to hide, run, de-escalate, all that. And they telling you what? Why they telling you that? Because they probably seen 1,000,001 scenarios where people do otherwise, and it doesn't end out well. You see? Romans 12:18 says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. And that takes control in your spirit. You know? Which the scriptures tell you that he that rule his spirit is better than he that taketh the city. Because when you take in a city, all right, guess you're conquering another individual. But when you rule your own spirit, you're conquering yourself, which is far harder, you know? So that's it in closing, man. I'm gonna give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shah, Ba'ashim Rachak Kadash, that belongs to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone Troop 12. Salutations to the hopeful elect out there. Akim to Zdakim. I do this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity.